Hello and welcome to the Guardian Film Show, coming as live from a sticky studio in the heart of summertime London. Alarming to report that the week's release schedule is awash with hot tempers, runaway hormones and the inevitable Marvel Comics blockbuster. By the end of the show, we shall all be requiring cold showers. Coming up imminently, rising star Belle Powley courts controversy in the startling Diary of a Teenage Girl.
I had sex today. Holy shit.
Director Sophie Hyde shows how a mother becomes father in the space of 52 Tuesdays.
Dad? Dad, 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 dad. Dad?
And Al Pacino is Manglehorn in a new film called Manglehorn.
I'm gonna clean out my garden. I'm gonna dig up the roots. I'm gonna start something fresh.
But what's the deal with the Fantastic Four? Poor them, they're the runts of the Marvel movie litter. They've had big screen missions before and it didn't go well. Still, they're undeterred, they're not about to be beaten, and they're back to prove once and for all just how fantastic they are.
How did we get this far? Human beings have an immeasurable desire to discover, to invent, to build.
One's stretchy, one's see-through, one's a great ball of fire, one's something or other. Put them together and they form the Fantastic Four, gamma mutations by way of Enid Blyton. They come to save the world in time for tea.
Be ready for what's coming.
What is coming?
The answers.
Like excited children on Christmas morning, I'm joined by Henry Barnes and Benjamin Lee. Henry, I can tell from your expression that you quite relish this one.
I really didn't. I'm lying through my teeth. It's strange, isn't it? Because the Fantastic Four are one of Marvel's weakest prospects, even though they're one of the first.
They are. They were the mainstay.
And like a stretchy man,
yeah,
and a man made of rocks, and a girl who in this iteration can make bubbles that you can fly in.
Oh, cool.
They're not particularly interesting. There's nothing about them that's particularly weird or strange or dark.
They don't have any angst,
They don't have any angst. And Tim Story's films, which were made before this in 2005 and 2007, were made in a time when blockbuster comic book movies were serious business, but they weren't serious business. And now they are serious business, and you can't make fun of the source material too much. You have to always be loving towards it. And I think a kind of flighty, campy version of Fantastic Four would have been a lot of fun. This is deadly serious, deadly dull, weirdly machine-tooled to try and fit all of the studio's demands. And it's got this strange thing because Josh Trank, who made it, did Chronicle before this as a kind of indie superhero drama. And it's got this strange thing of trying to have indie cred at the same time as being a superhero film.
Yeah.
So it does things like say that Portishead are a great band at the same time as swinging off into the galaxy. So you're left with a big kind of gumbo of very strange references and very odd studio decisions.
Is the problem with the Fantastic Four themselves? Because I think they were the first, and it was like 1963, and it's before all the kind of nuance and sort of edge and darkness that came into Marvel later on. And they're very much a kind of standard, almost kind of sitcom family, aren't they?
They are a sitcom family, but then Joss Whedon's done that with the Avengers, basically. He's made these contrasting characters come together and work together because they have to. And any group that's going to do that after Whedon now has to have that spice and the skill in the writing, and this just doesn't. It's just a muddle.
Ben, I'm looking at the still, it's not doing it for me.
Yeah, there's no real character to the film at all. It's proper kind of filmmaking by committee. It feels like a room of executives said, we've got a slot in our summer schedule, let's just make a film in a certain amount of time. It feels rushed, it feels really soulless. I think there's been problems on set. Apparently Josh Trank sort of fell out with some people apparently over some of the choices they made, and it feels that way. There's no voice there at all. You know, the Avengers has Joss Whedon at least. There's no comedy here, there's no character. It's just hopelessly kind of generic. There's no point in existing.
You've got a decent cast in there, though, haven't you?
This is the worst thing about it. Yeah, you get
cast.
these young actors who have all done great stuff kind of in smaller films, and they get nothing to do at all. They have no characteristics. They're all just superpowers, and they're kind of shit ones too. You know, there's this making bubbles, there's the odd fireball, and you know, even as a spectacle, the effects are dreadful too. They're kind of like, it's like Power Rangers shoddy near the end. It's kind of, I was kind of shocked by how incompetent the whole thing was, really.
perhaps most criminally of all as well, they've got Doom, who's one of the
Victor Von Doom. He's one of the great Marvel villains.
A great
I remember
Marvel
I read
arch
these
nemesis.
comics as a kid. I loved them.
So iconic that a hip hop artist came out and nicked his mask and turned that into his thing. And you don't even get the mask in this. You get this weird kind of Easter Island thing wrapped in cling film instead. It's just like, how can you mess up Doom? He's one of the main characters of the universe. How can you do it?
Doom. If you want to stop him, it's going to take everything you have.
Crash, bang, bubbles. It's the Fantastic Four. Let's now move on somewhere very different to tan-hued 1970s San Francisco. It's queasy, it's shocking. It's the diary of a teenage girl.
I feel so awkward and ugly and naive and lonely.
I know how you feel.
I have no friends. I don't want to go to school ever again. Nobody loves me. Maybe I should kill myself.
At the age of 15, Minnie Gatz feels that time is running short. She wants to fall in love, get wasted, draw comic books. She wants to have sex straight away before the opportunity goes begging. Her hippie mum's wayward boyfriend may just be Mr. Right Now.
I get distracted sometimes, overwhelmed by my all-consuming thoughts about sex and men. I always want to be touched. I don't know what's wrong with me.
Ben, did your own teenage diaries read remotely like this?
I was sort of making lists at 15 and not really doing much, not really leaving my room. But I think what it does kind of capture, and that I kind of remember, is that kind of impetuous irrationality of falling in love or lust for the first time and not knowing the conventions of what you should do or what you shouldn't do. And I think through Belle Powley, who's a fantastic find, you kind of see her learn how to act in a sort of semi-relationship with her mother's boyfriend. And you also see it through his eyes as someone who's 35, how annoying it can be, to kind of deal with someone at that age when they're going through that kind of stage.
Yeah, he's slightly to blame though as well. Though.
Oh yeah,
he's kind of culpable.
I don't feel sorry for him. I mean, that's the kind of thing though. The film never really labels him as a paedophile, although technically he is. And it's kind of interesting in that they kind of just show you what happens without kind of judging anyone or judging her for being a 15-year-old who wants to have sex and likes having sex. And I think it's really rare to see a woman of any age sort of in a film say that she likes having sex and not be judged for it too. So I think there's a lot of interesting stuff with what could have been quite a kind of generic plot.
It's great on the kind of cockeyed logic of adolescence as well, the way you kind of like make a myth of your life as it's going along, and how it's just absolutely embarrassing, that kind of speak and that way of framing your life as this kind of great thing when it's pretty grubby and messy and chaotic.
Yeah, the way that you kid yourself, basically, that you're the most important thing in the story of the world, which I think it does really well. It bears comparison this to American Splendor, the Harvey Pekor story, which I didn't think it quite matched up to that, but it's got that same sense of kind of dismal, grim, like, this is my life and let me make a fantasy of it because it's so boring and so dull.
And it's also got that kind of Venn diagram crossover with Robert Crumb's wife, Aileen Kaminsky, who's also a cartoonist who the mini character kind of idolises.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if that was her voice in it. I
didn't know either.
The cast list, but if it is, that's quite a get. That's an interesting thing to add in. I mean, the acting's great in this. I really like Alexander Skarsgård in it, and I thought that Kristen Wiig was great as well.
Yeah, and she doesn't overplay it at all.
No, not at all. And she really can do drama well. She can take it down a peg or two. I did feel a little bit. I don't know how to say this without sounding like a creep. I did feel that Belle Powley looked a bit too old for the part. So I kind of lost a little bit of belief there that she really was a teenager going through this, and a young teenager going through this.
I don't know, she kind of convinced me. She looks kind of like not quite grown and just so awkward.
But I think she was 21 when they filmed it. She's supposed to be 15. I actually think, compared to most of the actors they usually pick to play teenagers, I actually thought she kind of pulled it off. And you kind of see her throughout the film as well, at the start looking very much like a small child, and then as she kind of finds sexuality more, she becomes more comfortable with her body and she changes the way she dresses, and I think then she does look older, but I bought her as a 15-year-old.
It's not censorious, is it? And it almost in a weird way shows how this incredibly ugly, confusing, unpleasant time can be character building, strangely.
Yeah, it does. And there was quite a hoo-ha because it was given an 18 certificate by the BBFC, and the filmmakers campaigned against it, saying that you know, this is instructional, this is educational to some degree to teenagers, to say that sex is these things. It can be exciting and sexy, obviously, but there's also a payback to that, and you can't live in the fantasy, and you have to be real about what sex can do to you emotionally and physically. And so I think they have a point, really, that it's probably not worth the high rating because of that, and it does have some instructional value without being too weighty about it.
When I was in high school, well, boys were all over me.
Like my dad.
Yeah. Yeah, your dad and I were crazy about each other. He wasn't messed up then. I mean, he was just a wannabe artist with a fuck the world attitude. And he rode a Triumph Blackbird. Have I ever told you that? Fuck, it was fantastic. And my parents hated him. It was so hot.
The excellent Diary of a Teenage Girl there. And if you stagger out of that one thinking, what I really need now is another film about a teenage diary, then fear not, your cup runneth over. This is 52 Tuesdays.
Before we can prescribe hormones, your mum must continue to come to us for assessment. Now, I understand you've taken a male name. What do you think about your mum's new name, Billy?
Australian filmmaker Sophie Hyde charts a year in the life of 16-year-old Billy and her loving, stoic mother who is becoming her dad. James is transitioning and Billy's in flux. In 52 Tuesdays, they will both come to rest.
It's Tuesday.
Tuesday. Same time, every week without fail.
Henry, it's a small, intimate film, but it makes a bonus of that, I thought.
Yeah, I mean, I came into this expecting some grandstanding, either politically or socially, about transgender issues, and at the start of this, it does almost verge on that. It starts to give you a lecture about what it is to transition. It says, oh, I'm going to be taking these drugs for this amount of time, and these are the effects I'll see. And I thought, God, this could get pretty dry. But it moves away from that pretty quickly and becomes a really measured, really careful, interesting drama about the characters, whatever they're going through. It doesn't really matter what state of, or what gender they are in. I didn't really like the teenager's performance in this as much as Diary of a Teenage Girl.
No, compared to that, it felt thin.
It does feel a bit thin, and also it's pegged to this art project that the character's doing, which leads to a lot of these confessional straight-to-camera videos, which are very, very teenage, and you have to really run with them. And it pays off in the end, but it takes a long time to get there to any kind of richness or source behind it.
What do you reckon?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a difficult week comparing it to Diary of a Teenage Girl because there are a lot of similarities, and I think what's interesting is that Diary of a Teenage Girl is from a first-time filmmaker, but you'd never guess it's so accomplished, whereas this is from Sophie Hyde's made quite a few films before, and this to me feels quite amateurish. I know she picked a lot of non-professional actors, and I think you can kind of tell on the outskirts sometimes it's quite kind of am-dram, to be honest. I think the lead girl, I think her character isn't particularly interesting, but she's got some real presence. Whereas I think the character of her mother, who's becoming her father, is more interesting, but you don't get to see enough of him. You know, I think the trans experience is interesting, but I don't think this film's really the one that to give you much insight into it. I kind of wanted to know more, really.
It's still a kind of slice of life, though, isn't it? It kind of made me feel that you did know these people and you knew that world, and in a way that I hadn't before.
Yeah, but I found that the teenage issue she goes through, though, not particularly interesting. I mean,
it's a bit extraordinary as well, right? Like, it's hard to talk about it without giving it away, but there's an awful lot of her experimenting sexually as a teenager and doing it in a way that seems almost magic realist and odd and otherworldly. And if you're trying to tie that into a real life drama about another character's transition from being a woman to a man, it sells the real life story a little bit short, I felt, and you kind of got lost in this weird sexy haze that this teenage girl was trying to create for herself.
And I think that, and also because the structure is it's kind of 52 Tuesdays over a year, so you kind of get a bit from each Tuesday. Both of those things kind of distract from the fact that the story isn't that interesting. I don't think there's enough about it, but I think the kind of gimmicks make you think it's got more to it. And I think I didn't walk away as involved as I think I wanted to be. So it just felt like a bit of a missed opportunity.
Adam's up.
You're still into women, right?
Yeah, of course.
But if you're with them, are they a lesbian or are they straight?
I don't want to be with anyone yet.
When then?
When I'm a man.
I thought you were a man now.
Running one by one through 52 Tuesdays. Just time for one last film and one veritable giant of American cinema. Call his name 3 times and he will appear. Manglehorn, Manglehorn, Manglehorn.
I like your shirt.
Yeah?
You look good.
You do too. Thank you. You look like a racehorse or something. Yeah.
I look like a
I don't
racehorse.
know. Yeah, I said that just.
Well, there's worse things.
I don't know. Things just come out of my head sometime.
No.
I always say the wrong thing.
Al Pacino is Manglehorn, a cantankerous old locksmith still in mourning for the one who got away. Manglehorn has no trouble freeing a little kid who's got himself trapped inside a car. The one thing he can't unlock is his own curdled heart.
I'm happy you asked me to dinner.
Where's your bathroom?
Ben, if nothing else, it's good to see Al Pacino kind of dialing it down and working with a distinctive director here in David Gordon Green.
Yeah, I think the past few years have been kind of interesting for him. He's worked quite a lot, but nothing's really kind of worked that well. Although compared to De Niro, he's not been taking paycheck roles. He's been doing kind of smaller stuff. And it's always been kind of all right, but not great. And I think this is kind of, to me, still in the kind of all right, but not great zone. I think it's good that he's not going over the top, and it's an interesting character for him to take on. He's not just a kind of grumpy old man. He's like a difficult, almost autistic at times kind of guy who's not really aware of how to act in social situations. There's a really horrible date scene with him and Holly Hunter where he just talks about the woman that he's in love with.
Yeah.
And it's just the most excruciating scene.
And he's just a kind of liar, really. He's utterly unsympathetic at times, isn't he?
Yeah, he is, but you still kind of, he reads his letters out to the woman who he still loves, who he isn't with, and they're so melancholic and sweet that you kind of feel sorry for him, even though he's kind of acting like a bit of a douchebag. There's a great scene with his son too, where he has this kind of argument with him, and he kind of acts in the way that a father doesn't usually act towards his son. It's kind of interesting to watch. But these little character, as a character study, and those kind of things worked. But then it's kind of suffocated to me by David Gordon Green's direction, who started out interestingly with George Washington and All the Real Girls, then did these weird stoner comedies, and Your Highness was one of the worst films in recent memory, and then he comes back to try and do small films again, and to me he's kind of forgotten how to do it. Cause
I like Joe, though, the one he did before this.
Joe and Prince Avalanche were both good. This to me is a bit of a misstep. It's full of all this magical realism again, and it's kind of almost not as bad as Lost River, but it has those moments which just feel really kind of unnecessary and kind of like a first-time filmmaker showing off.
I quite like some of those, though.
Yeah,
I like the bit where he walks past the multi-vehicle pile-up on
with
the
the
road,
watermelons.
and all the watermelons are smashed.
Or he walks past the trap dancers. They're kind of breaking, and Al Pacino just standing there.
And I know what Ben means.
Yeah.
I know that it's ridiculous,
They
kind of
are
flourishy
irritating,
stuff,
but
but it still has a kind of power to it.
Yeah, and if you've seen them as expressions of what Manglehorn's thinking, like his own twisted psyche, I quite like all that, really. And I like the fact that this film is reflective on Pacino himself. There's loads of references to his career. He says to the security guard as he leaves, "The world is yours." In the bank, there's apparently the set is the same as the one in Dog Day Afternoon.
Oh, is it? I didn't notice
Yeah,
that.
it's very much David Gordon Green as a love letter to Pacino, but without doing the thing that a lot of people do with Pacino, which is basically him playing a heightened version of himself.
Yeah, like wind him up and then let him
go, and be that guy. And it's really difficult to do that with Pacino, obviously, because he's an icon, he's a legend, and he's created his own legend. And how do you ever break away from that? It turns out you do it by stuffing him in the back of a film that is actually quite strange and plays on the fact it has Al Pacino, but does it very subtly and cleverly, I think.
It's nice seeing him play like an old man as well. Like so many of actors of his age are playing much younger, and he is playing an old man. And
although Holly Hunter's 20 years younger.
This is the problem, that Holly Hunter's 20 years younger, so it kind of falls into that trap.
But that qualifies as parity in Hollywood.
Yeah, exactly. It's close. She's pretty much a 75-year-old woman in their term. I just took too much harp music as well. Like, there was just this kind of like dreamy vibe that just didn't really work for me.
It's almost sounding that you're wanting David Gordon Green to go back to the frat boy toga stoner parties.
Oh Christ, no! I never want to see Your Highness again. But I think he's actually moving on from this to kind of doing more serious stuff. He's doing Our Brand Is Crisis, the Sandra Bullock political satire. Then he's doing one of the Boston bombing marathon, one of the many Boston Marathon films. So I think he's moving on and upwards, hopefully, from this.
I got real pain in my heart.
Maybe this other woman, she'll return. Then maybe you'll remember how to love someone.
Dear Clara, The world's changed so much, and I've been around for so many years.
Dear Clara,
I just want you to look at me one more time.
Lush, lyrical, borderline lachrymose. That's David Gordon Green's Manglehorn. And so it is with sorrow that we prepare to dim the studio lights and lock the door as we leave. My thanks to Henry Barnes and Benjamin Lee. We're back, open for business, same time next week.